many faces, not one, not two, but 6 different races. You know when the sun kisses your skin, you're in the right place. G-U-I-A-N-N, oh, that's my beautiful country. G-U-I-A-N-N, one people, one nation, one destiny. Don't stop for a minute. Come, let me take a walk. Brother, take it. You'll see our landmarks and our monuments. They're so unique. The hybrid structure, the lighthouse, the tallest wooden structures, cathedral, 176 monuments, and the beautiful city hall. You know with the wind in your hair, you're in the right place. G-U-I-A-N-N, oh, that's my beautiful country. G-U-I-A-N-N, one people, one nation, one destiny. Look down from your
Awesome. Folks, welcome to the Alliance for Change press conference for today, July 22nd. We're privileged to be joined by Dr. Vincent Adams. You know, he's the resident expert in all things oil and gas. And also we're joined by Mr. David Patterson, who helps us in this regard as well. We're going to have a statement out of Dr. Vincent Adams, and we're going to have general comments and answers to any questions you might have out of both Judah Finance, who's going to be who can help us with anything economics, and also David on the oil and gas front, and generally all rounders. So we thank you guys for joining us again today. Dr. Vincent Adams, over to you, sir.
Hey, thanks, Sherrod, and thanks for all of the news media folks who found the time to be here out of your busy schedule. But anyway, hey, I had a I want to touch on the debate of yesterday in Parliament, and I just had a small window of opportunity to look at part of the video, and to be honest, I was a little bit taken aback and disappointed as to what I thought was some just on seriousness of some of it, when it gave the impression as if some of our legislators are not they're not paying attention to the business at hand, or it's just misinformation. And so let me start with some specific. The Honorable MP, Mr. Dattadin, I think, and I listened to his entire speech, and I think he was way off. It had nothing to do with, and I would like for Mr. Dattadin or anybody to point out, I listened also to the Honorable MP Patterson presentation, the whole presentation and the motion, and I did not hear one single time where it was mentioned anything about unlimited insurance coverage. Nothing. I have never said that, and I don't think I've heard anybody say that. What I've been talking about is unlimited liability coverage. So let me explain again for everybody once again. I've done this over and over. Insurance is a part of the full unlimited coverage. What had happened in Lisa 2 was when this administration, when I was there, when I approached Exxon, because the agreement had originally said that it was going to be self-insured, EEPGL had no assets to cover any type of major spill. So that was in Lisa 1. We decided that I was not going to accept that for Lisa 2. So I sat there with the country manager Mr. Rod Henson, and after some pushing back, we decided that he was going to go out and get insurance. He went out, got insurance. I think it was from a British company to the tune of around $2.5 billion in insurance. That was the maximum being offered. We came back and we decided, the EPA decided that was not enough, especially based on the Macondo that was running a cost of 70 billion. So the question to them was, who was going to make that up? The government the national budget was less than 2 billion. So you were telling me that the government of Guyana is going to come up with 68 billion to cover that, just in case you get a similar spirit, to use it as an example. That was when we decided that EEPGL was not going to be the sole company carrying the liability. And that was when we decided to drag in the parent company starting with Exxon. And it was not going to be an insurance. It was going to be a guarantee commitment, which is a documented letter of commitment, which was supposed to be a guarantee. So when you add the insurance, which was the maximum in the market, whatever that number is, at the time it was, like I said, about 2.5 billion. When you add that to the guarantee from the parent company, that's what makes up the unlimited liability coverage, not unlimited insurance coverage. So Mr. Datadin, he's almost every word or words that came out from him was, we're not gonna be, come up with all sorts of reasons where you cannot obtain insurance to that magnitude, and you're gonna run small business out, which has absolutely nothing to do. It was totally inaccurate. But what was interesting and ironical, Mr. Datadin at the end of his speech agreed with the position taken by the previous government, because he said, if it's the case that we're proposing to have an insurance and then have the parent company cover whatever additional, he said he's willing to go with it. So I hope that he voted, because if he had paid attention to the bill, that's exactly what the bill said. So Mr. Datadin, my advice to you, with all due respect, sir, is to go back, check what the bill said, and it's exactly what you said at the end, just getting to the close. That and the media, I'm asking you to go check what he said at the end. After talking about insurance, which was totally inaccurate, that was not what was discussed. Nowhere did I see in that motion, and Mr. Patterson can come in here if he wants to, where it says unlimited liability insurance. It says unlimited liability coverage, which includes insurance and parent company coverage. So, Mr. Datadin, I would advise you to go back, and hopefully when you go back and see that's what it's saying. Even the permit, that's the language in the permit. I wrote the language in there. That's what the language is saying. So, Mr. Datadin, I would implore that you go back and look at the and look at the tape or the video, whatever you guys use, and maybe hopefully you would vote for the motion, which I think is it's a good thing for the nation and for protection of the people. It's really a serious matter. Now, in terms of specifics, of some other specifics that I saw here, the Honorable Minister and Member of Parliament, Mr. Barrett, he's asking to show documents, the March 29 document. Well, is Mr. Barrett saying that what's in the permit is the permit that referenced that document, and I can tell you what that document is. The same insurance that we're talking about, the insurance that they brought to the EPA, and I went public, of course. I went public and people were amazed. Even the insurance brokers, they were amazed. I even met this international guy who was a big international insurance broker. He said, how come you guys are Guyana is the first country in the world to have obtained unlimited liability coverage, not insurance. He knew the difference. And so I went public. The insurance folks got a hold of that. The Insurance Association, I think that's what they call it in Guyana. And they started raising a whole bunch of noise. They said, hey, that insurance has to come to Guyana because it was a British policy, I think. So we met at the World Bank, not at the World Bank, sorry, at the Bank of Guyana with the Dr. Gango, who's the governor of the Bank of Guyana. We met with Dr. Bino and his lawyer and the insurance folks from the Insurance Association to iron out what type of arrangement we need to bring that insurance, whether it's a partnership with that insurance, with a local insurance company. So that was what that letter was about. And it's there, it's documented by just the permit mentioning it. That letter is there. So for them to say they don't have a copy, and if to suggest even that it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. What I would again ask the media to do, if they still insist, even though I'm not sure the value of it anyway, but for them to deny that such a letter exists, it's I think it's unacceptable, and challenge them if that's the case, that they need to produce it. The other thing was, they talk about, well, we did not abandon. I'm glad that they finally accepted that the plan does exist, because now the documentation is coming out with the plan. The World Bank, besides and I've been reading about the $20 million that the World Bank has loaned the government, and they refused even to build capacity, by the way, for the oil industry and every place else. And they hadn't even come up with a plan to build the capacity. But on top of that, the World Bank, I went out, and it was, by the way, it was the Brazilian ambassador to Brazil that introduced me to the lady who was in charge of the World Bank. Anyway, we ended up with $1 million for the EPA. She asked me what I want. I told her I need to build capacity. She gave me $1 million. We brought in this expert from Brazil. We put together this plan, a very detailed plan, as the Honorable Minister Patterson said, with an organization chart, the qualifications, high-level people, petroleum engineers, geological engineers, environmental engineers, with the requisite academic and experience. I don't think we had anybody there that we were requiring with less than 5 years experience, in addition to probably a master's degree, but it was high-level experience, folks. That's the plan. So when I hear about the 13, somehow they're saying, well, it's that we now have 13. What are their qualifications? This is the question I need to ask them. What are their qualifications? Since you're claiming you haven't abandoned that plan, well, all along you're claiming that the plan doesn't exist. We were making this stuff, or I was making this stuff up. So now that you've admitted that you haven't abandoned the plan, where does these 13 positions fit into that plan? How many of them are petroleum engineers? How many of them are electrical, chemical engineers? How many of them are geological engineers? That's where the tire meets the road in understanding what is going on offshore. Those are key positions. Here's the other part. As part of that plan, that staff was supposed to be on those FPSOs 24/7 to see firsthand what's going on. I hear this. Did I? Okay. I hear the stuff now that we've got satellite monitoring. Well, guess who started this whole idea of satellite monitoring? It was done when I was there, the first meeting we had, and it was, we have, matter of fact, we've got, the EPA has 2 drones, by the way. At least when I left there, we had a meeting with the Department of Forestry in Kingston. I had like 2 or 3 meetings with them. My staff met with them because they had a satellite platform that they had they had the framework, the infrastructure, and everything else, except they were underutilized. So we formed a partnership with them so that we can use that for mining and for offshore or wherever. So this whole thing now that they're taking credit for this is absolute not true. But here's the other part of that. You cannot know what's going on board a ship, an FPSO, with satellite. You cannot see inside the ship. You got to be on the ship. You got to be in the control room You got to be walking down the operations. You do not see that from a satellite. The only thing you're going to see from a satellite is a big ship with water surrounding it. And you're going to see a spill, but by the time you see a spill, it's going to be too late. Hopefully they will report a spill. So this whole thing that they're now claiming credit for, the EPA staff need to get out there in person 24/7 to monitor the operation so they can see everything that's going on. Right now, they're very tight-lipped about whether they're flaring or not, because what's interesting, the data that they put on the website, I can't remember the website, it has the oil production, it has the water production, but what you're not, it has the gas production, I think, but you're not even seeing how much gas is being used being on the ship, how much is being re-injected, and how much is being flared. Why have they stopped publishing that data about a year ago? If you go look at the data, they stopped publishing that data since last year, I think May or June. Why have they? And that was the time, of course, when all the controversy come up, when people start questioning the whole flaring issue. They have stopped publishing that data. Why are you hiding that data? When the only data you're publishing right now is the oil production and the water production. Where is the gas production? So this whole thing about looking at with a satellite, you can't tell how much gas is being flared from a satellite. You've got to be on the ship in the control room. That was what that 36-member plan was. So this 13, I don't know how the 13 came up, or what are their qualifications. So maybe they need to explain it. Now, here's the other thing that I heard come up today, which was kind of interesting: the capping stock. So the capping stock is, and I couldn't remember if they explained what a capping stock is. It's this big piece of equipment where if you get a blowout, you come and you put it on top of it's a big heavy piece of equipment. You put it on top of the well, and it does resist the pressure that is coming up with the blowout. So it stops. It's designed to stop the oil from coming out. Well, guess where that came from? It was under the EPA and the Department of Energy under Dr. Bino. We had meetings in Houston. We had several meetings when we came back. As a matter of fact, the key part of is what's the response time from the time you get a spill. How fast can you get that the capping stock to the FPSO? I think at one time they had something like 20 days, and we said absolutely not. Dr. Bino was adamant. We said we set a goal for them. We said it has to be at least 3 days. We said you're not going to keep it. I think they had it in somewhere in the US. I think it's Houston or something. We said absolutely not. We looked at Guyana, except that they said that they just for the port, to get a port to come in, we couldn't come in because of the port. The flights, there were some issues with transportation, getting it into the logistics. So we said, okay, in the meantime, while we work in those issues, bring it out of Trinidad. They brought it, they said, okay, they agreed to Trinidad. And then they had it on the far side of Trinidad. And we insisted that it has to, because what was going to happen, by the time they hear about it, it's going to take 1 day for it to get from wherever the part of Trinidad, wherever it was, to the point, to the port for shipment. We said, no, at least you can cut out 1 day by putting it at the port itself. So all this arrangement, so I think we had brought them down to 5 days and challenged them to give us 3 days of turnaround time. So all this stuff is as if, well, they're now inventing this stuff. It's totally, I don't know if whoever is informing them is misinforming them, or they're just deliberately just saying it to gain some cheap points or something. Then the other thing that I keep hearing all the time, and I think in order to not damage the administration credibility, and we were all for oil production. Trust me, there's nobody who advocates for producing oil. There's one area that I agree with the vice president. I've said this over and over. We need to produce and produce as fast as possible to get that window so that the country can develop. But the one thing that I don't agree with is the way that we're doing it. We need to do it safe and environmentally sound. That's where we differ. But so when I hear that the administration keeps saying, well, we've improved the environmental oversight, that's absolutely not true. That's absolutely not true. Some of the things that they talk about now that I hear them saying, well, the first time we've introduced this money for flaring, which is the biggest joke, because when I tell my friends about this, in Harlem, even I get embarrassed sometimes to tell them, and they kind of laugh at us saying that we're using this fee, this paltry fee. Now it's $50 per ton of CO2 emitted. Let me tell you again for the umpteenth time what this means. Again, for every barrel of oil, again, they're not giving us these numbers, so I'm just going with the old numbers that I had. For every barrel of oil, and the average right now, the latest data that I had is about, it's close to 1,200. I mean, 1,200 cubic feet of gas for every barrel. So all you've got to do to stop flaring, if they claim for Liza 1 alone, so I don't know how much they're flaring on Liza 2 because nobody knows any data from Liza 2 as far as that is concerned. Let them release that data. What that means, again, I'm just going to use the old numbers. It might even be worse now, and you got to suspect that it's probably worse because they're not releasing it. The latest data that I saw, they were flaring 4 to 5 million cubic feet per day gas. And all you've got to do, since with using that number, 1,000 to 1,200 cubic feet per barrel, is cut back your production by about 4,000 barrels per day. Now I hear that they've gone to 150,000 barrels per day in Liza 1, which is absolutely outside of the risk envelope that was defined in the EIA, but that's another discussion. They're not supposed to be producing more than 120,000 barrels per day, period. That's what the EIA says, and the EIA is the document, is the Bible that defines the safety envelope. So for you to willy-nilly go out there and up it to 150,000 barrels through greed because of the increased oil price, and you're putting everything at risk. You talk about an oil spill. The equipment, anytime the EIA says that this here is your safe operating limit, those words are sacred. Safe operating limit, you don't even want to go close to it, because in the US, if you ever touch that safe operating limit, you're shut down. But they've got the gumption now to go to 150,000 barrels per day. So going back to my point, so let's use that as an example. The 4,000 barrels per day that you got to cut back to get to the required amount based on the data that we currently have. That 4,000 barrels, the reason why they wouldn't do that and they would continue to flare, that 4,000 barrels per day that they've got to cut back on today's price, you're looking at about $500,000 per day. $500,000 per day they will be losing. You know how much they're paying in fine to emit that amount of gas? About $12,000 per day. So here you are giving, so it's not a deterrence, which is what the environmental regulations is, and which is what they're claiming as a deterrence. So you tell me, any common sense, you don't even gotta have common sense. If I am spending $12,000 to make $500,000, is that a deterrence, or isn't it, or is it an encouragement or incentive? Tell me. That's what's going on. So every time they talk about this whole flaring stuff and how now they're charging a fine, it's absolutely ridiculous. And they ought to stop saying that, because it's embarrassing. And there's something they're really something silly, to be honest with anybody, any independent person who's listening. So they need to stop talking about that. I don't know if you guys want me to continue until I addressed every one of them, but let me go to the specifically, which is what's raising the argument again with this whole thing in the Liza 2, and then they copy the same language in Liza 2 and all the other permits that they received. So I believe that it's either they're not understanding or they're not reading, because you don't even have to be an expert in environmental stuff to read and understand what's in the permit. It's clear, crystal. It says, like Minister Patterson, MP Patterson said, Section 12.1 says, thou shalt have insurance. Those were the words, insurance. Section 12.3 says that the EPA has to review these insurance from time to time to make sure that it's current, and a whole list of things on top of you paying your premium. Section 12.5 says that anything over and above that insurance has to be covered by the parent company. It's basic as that. Yet, even though it's there, yet they went ahead and they started up Lisa 2 without those requirements being satisfied. That is the issue that they need to explain. And I and others have been raising this question. They need to answer it to the public as to why they're violating their own laws. So those are some of the issues, and I'll wait for other questions.
Thanks very much, Dr. Vincent
Yes.
Adams. Folks, we have quite a number of issues there, and I think Deputy Patterson is going to make an intervention.
Thank you, and good afternoon. As the media would note out yesterday, we last evening actually finished at 12:30. There was a debate on this exactly, liability coverage, but of course, as expected, it was defeated by the government with able support from a lone opposition member who represents some of the most vulnerable communities in this country. So it was quite strange and surprising that he would that the lone opposition person would support such a motion. But what was troublesome to me was the comments coming out of the government. One minister called the motion trash, and I'm quoting here, palpable nonsense, non-issue. And another minister called a motion calling for coverage to protect our people, anti-developmental. Not minister, not a member of parliament, my apologies. And it's fear mongering. So it obviously, and that the opposition were trying to create mischief by the sense of highlighting these issues. So it's clear that the government have decided that they will proceed at all pace. And as Vince explained, it's not a question of us trying to stop Exxon's production rate or anything like that. What we're asking to do is mitigate against any damages. I took a lot of time explaining that oil spills it's not only about the oil. You can clean up the oil, but the detrimental effects can last months, years, or even years. The effects of Deepwater Horizon is still being felt in California and those places like that. And we were simply saying that particularly for the vulnerable communities, the indigenous communities who depend on these waterways for their livelihood, that we should have that even if a spill occurs and then it occurs and even if you successfully clean it up today, but next year you're finding that your feedstock or your water is polluted and those things like that, that we should have insurance coverage to get them back to where they were. And that was a simple reason and this underlying reason for the motion. And we also wanted to highlight that other countries have already signaled that they will litigate against Guyana in the event of a oil spill. During the EIA public briefings for Yellowtail, the Trinidadian fishermen and friendship societies openly stated that they're willing to go to court, carry Exxon, EPA, the government of Guyana to court, should there be a spill that affects their shipping grounds as in Trinidad. So we thought it's important to lay a marker down, get it on record. We thought it's important that we requested to do a baseline study. And a baseline study is simply a report of exactly what is existing in our communities today. So in the event of a peril, which is an oil spill, poor indigenous communities don't have to go up against that behemoth of Exxon and their lawyers and an uncaring government to prove to them what they had went before the spill. And we set out that we do a baseline study. The government funds it because it's with the benefit of the Guyanese, all Guyanese. And we lodge it with the ministry, the Parliamentary Association of Natural Resources. And whoever comes in from after that study has been done, that can be referred to them. But the government's attitude once again was that anything that the opposition or the general public, because I know this particular matter has engaged several members of the general public, that it is anti-developmental and a waste of time. And irrespective of whatever others say, they're willing to proceed hellbound with the pursuit of getting the petrodollars. So those are just my comments in summary on the motion last night.
Thanks very much.
Sorry. Go ahead, Sharon.
And I was going to say thanks very much, David Patterson. Of course, you know, David has been the former Minister of Infrastructure. But if Dr. Adams has another intervention, I would give way.
Yes, the one thing that bothers me sometimes, and and for those of you who may not know, I worked at the highest level of the U.S. government, so I dealt with the Exxons of the world. That was my daily job to where Exxon worked for us basically, and maybe that's the culture I'm coming from. We didn't work for them. As a matter of fact, when we say jump, those presidents ask how high. So when I hear ministers saying, well, these are big companies and negotiating with them is like negotiating with a country. It shows to me, it verifies that we're intimidated. And we're even scared to even question what they're doing. These are the same big companies, the same Exxon that, for example, Minister Patterson referenced the data that showed how many spills they have all over the world. This is the same Exxon that had spills even in Guyana. There's 6, if you folks remember, 6 small spills. And you know what those spills were about? When you go buy a piece of instrument, a toaster or something from wherever you buy it from, it has a label there. Every one of those things have a safety label telling you, you can't do this or you can't plug it into this unit. The hoses that they were operating with says, you shall inspect your hoses before use. Okay? In the first year, they used the hose. They had 3 small spills. We gave them a pass, and even though we gave them the next year, same thing. So, in 6 months, within 1 year, they had 6 spills, and that's telling you something, that the conduct of operations needs a lot to be desired. So don't let us say that because these companies are somehow big and powerful. That is the reason why we in the U.S. always made certain we had somebody on wherever the operations are, looking and seeing for ourselves, because 99% of the time what they tell you, it's not what is happening there. And I can tell you something, I don't know if this is going to scare you or not. We see what happened in Peru with a company that is operating in Guyana. And that same company, by the way, I remember once when there was a spill, I heard, I was out of the country, as a matter of fact, and my officer called me and said, hey, we just got a report from the company saying we just had a little spill of 70 barrels of mud, the drilling mud, and it's no big deal. I said, what? I said, I need for you to get a team immediately on that ship, and you interview all the operators to find out exactly what went on. You know what went on there? It was the mud that brings up the cuttings when you bore the hole, that brings up the cuttings out of the well. and deposit the cuttings, and that mud returns back into the well to keep the well from blowing out because of the pressure, and it has to be of a certain thickness to bring it up. You know what was happening? There was a return valve on the surface. When that mud went up to the surface, the valve was in disrepair and was dumping the mud in the ocean, which means that we could, it's fortunate for us, an operator was passing by and see the mud being dumped in the ocean, or else we would have had an empty hole, and who knows what the blowout could have been, because there would have been nothing to regulate the pressure, nothing to bring the cuttings to the surface. We were lucky that we escaped. And that valve, there was a maintenance put in, an operator put in a maintenance requirement for that valve months before it, and they just ignored it. So when we talk about these companies, somehow, you know, they're better than anything we've ever seen, don't let that intimidate you. They're human beings. They are here to make money, and they will do shortcuts. So you know, every time I hear our leaders start talking about these things, these people are gods, you know, I mean, I cringe, because you know, we're being fooled, or we still have this colonial type of mentality ingrained in our thoughts.
Thanks very, very much, Dr. Vincent Adams. And I have with me here Ms. Rita Finance. And of course, I said earlier on that Rita is our point person on finance, and Rita is going to be offering some comments on some of what has been happening locally, nationally, where the economy is concerned. Rita, go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Sharad, Duncan. I want to just read a very short statement that addressed primarily a specific concern when it comes to the hinterland and the riverine area and the cash grant distribution as it is being done currently. The statement reads, even as Guyanese continue to face extreme inflation, particularly on the prices of basic food items such as bread, sugar, cooking oil, and so much others. Even as that is happening, the AFC now has to call on the PPP government to stop the discriminatory manner in which the hinterland and riverine cash grant of $25,000 is being distributed. The AFC is in receipt of numerous reports of corruption in the distribution of the cash grant. Many reports particularly coming out of Region number 7, Bartica, in which residents in the same constituency are experiencing what the AFC considers blatant discrimination, in which one part of the constituency is being given the cash grant and the other part of the same constituency not given the cash grant. In addition, there are numerous complaints from across the country in which residents in the hinterland and riverine communities are experiencing double standard in the distribution of the cash grant. The same that was experienced in the distribution of the COVID-19 cash grant of $25,000 also. The AFC views the cash grant distribution mechanism under the PPP administration as chaotic and biased, and calls on the PPP to spend taxpayers' dollars in an accountable and transparent manner without a political filter. The AFC notes that even yesterday, at the 48th sitting of the 12th Parliament, the PPP tabled a supplementary financial paper for the sum of $44.794 billion. This provision, once passed in the National Assembly, will take the sum approved for the year 2022 to $597.694 billion. However, this magnitude of spending has not been beneficial to the ordinary Guyanese, with the inflation rate out of control and constant increase in the cost of living. The FCC calls on the PPP administration to address the concerns of the hinterland and riverine residents as it pertains to the distribution of the cash grant in the discriminatory manner in which it is done. The AFC further calls on the administration to urgently devise a plan to deal with the high cost of living that is being experienced by every Guyanese.
Thank you very much, Jarita. And folks, I want to offer just a couple of comments on the National Assembly at large. As you know, we're approaching the period when we're going to head into a recess as a National Assembly to end this session. And then it's going to be back up and running, hopefully in October. but somewhere around the 10th of August, the National Assembly is going to go into recess. We're very, very concerned about the quality of work of the National Assembly over the last year. This session, since it's come back from the last recess in last October, we have seen a number of unfortunate things transpiring in the National Assembly. Of course, one of those would have been the infamous dildo comment and that whole saga there that involves Minister Nigel Darmalal. And we have seen a very, very biased nature of the speaker coming to the fore. We call it all very, very unfortunate. But again, the very quality of work that the National Assembly has been involved in is cause for concern after a promise this second year of a very, very robust National Assembly. It seems as though the Parliament is only convened when the administration needs money. And so you tack a couple of things onto the session and you call it a sitting, but what they're really and truly coming for is more money that is going to be misspent and mismanaged and all the other things. Parliament over the last session has met 16 times. 16 times, and I want you to know that part of that would have been the budget debates, which would have happened in February of last year. The budget was of this year rather. The budget was passed in early March. That includes that 16 times. The corresponding period for the second year of the coalition government, Parliament met 26 times, and of course the body of legislation that was produced far outstrips what has been done for the last session of Parliament, which again goes into recess. We have seen, and again, this goes to the kind of legislation that is going to be available to the Guyanese people, the kind of orderly society we want to have. This is a country that is hurting, but we see a Parliament that seldom meets, and who knows when Parliament is going to be reconvened. Again, a lot of unfortunate things has gone on since then. That we do not want to see a recurrence. The opposition, the parliamentary opposition, has a very hard time getting meaningful motions onto the debate floor of the National Assembly, three of which were not allowed just yesterday. The information that we have at hand suggests that there were 17 motions submitted by the parliamentary opposition over the last year. Of course, only about 5 or 6 of them made their way onto the order paper and were actually allowed to be debated in the National Assembly. This doesn't augur well for a government that touts themselves as being of a good governance, administration, transparency, and democracy, and all of that. When a mere 6 motions would have made its way from 17 onto the order paper. And of course, we know we're in that era where the Speaker of the National Assembly looks for the flimsiest of excuses to put aside a motion, 2 of which, of course, came up for discussion, or should have come up for discussion yesterday. The one that deals with the accusations, the allegations that have been put forward by Vice News and the conduct of the Vice President. And you had also a very, very substantive motion in that one that should have been discussing the cost of living in this country. Of course, the government is coming for $4 billion, the same amount that was almost that was taken out of the National Resources Fund quite recently. Of course, all of that is to help lower the cost of living, according to them, but they don't want a substantive motion to discuss the cost of living in this country. So we find the quality of work that has come out of the National Assembly very, very much subpar, and we're very hopeful as we come out of, or at least the government comes out of recess, because I don't think the opposition are really going to be going into recess, the parliamentary opposition. We hope that that there is a truly robust parliament, and that we get more work done for the Guyanese people. Folks, we are now open for your questions, and we do have, in addition to the panelists, I do see leader of the party, leader of the Alliance for Change, Kemraj Ramjitan, is with us on as well. I see also our vice chair, Ricky Ryan Ramshoop, is here with us as well, and they may make interventions based on your questions. The floor is open, members of the media.
Mr. Duncan, Adam Harris. You can hear me?
Mr. Harris, Yes, sir. Mr. Harris, go right ahead.
No, this is for Mr. Adams. Mr. Adams, you said that the Exxon, I call the whole thing Exxon, is producing 150,000 barrels per day, when in fact the stipulation was 120,000 barrels. Sir, may I ask, how were you made aware of this volume of production? And two, can you say whether the government was informed that production would have been hiked by this 30,000 barrels?
Dr. Adams, please.
Your mic is muted. Vince, your mic is muted.
Got it. You got me now?
Yeah.
Go ahead. So Adam, hey, how are you doing? Hey, this sometime last year, as I recall, there was talk about it, only talk from the. It so happened that I like the guy who's in charge of Hess, because he's the only one who comes out and brags about how well his company is doing, and that's where you get most of this information. So since last year, he and I think I can't remember who else came out and said they're gonna up it to 100 and I think it was 144,000 barrels, and I said what? So I went to the meet. I might have even written a letter to the editor to say that this is craziness. They cannot do that without going back for revision of the EIA. So that went calm until now, when the oil prices went out of the roof. Suddenly they're bragging, the same Hess person, and I think even the government themselves are talking about. Now the Liza one has upped its production to 150,000 barrels per day. So that's all in the press coming from them. And so that's where I've gotten the information from. So this is no secret. They themselves have disclosed that they're operating now at the 100. It sounds like that's official now, that it's 150,000 barrels per day. When it says, anytime you see something that says the safe operating limit is a certain number, that is sacred. You never even go close to it. You know what the companies, like when we set those numbers like in the United States that says that's your limit, they would set their internal controls to be at least 10% below that limit. So they would have normally said, well, okay, we're not going to operate above 110,000 barrels per day, because then you want to come close to that limit that is set, which is a safe operating limit. And that safe operating limit is set there based on the design of the facilities and the equipment size, all the details that is put into that design. And when it says safe operating limit, you do not go close to it. So that's what bothers me, which means that's something that would increase the likelihood of something happening.
The question I was asking, sir, was the government informed? Did they need the permission of the government?
No. Yes, they did. What I'm saying is that was in the EIA, which was approved, signed by all the stakeholders who were involved, the whole of Guyana, whoever else wanted comments, and it's there in plain language. This is the exact language. You don't need any. All you need to do is read that, and it says it several times. The safe operating limit, it's 120,000 barrels of oil per day. You cannot change that unless you go back through the EIA, and the EPA knows about it, because last year when I raised it, the executive director, I don't know, he kind of say, well, no, they're allowed to do it, even though the EIA says it. And he brought up this thing about the EIA saying that, he was comparing apples and oranges, which means that he didn't even understand what the numbers meant. The 144,000 barrels per day that he was referencing had nothing to do with the oil production. It was the model that they ran, a conservative model for emissions. It had nothing to do with safe operating limits. What you normally do is say, when they were running a model to see, well, okay, how much are we going to emit in the atmosphere? So let's be conservative. We're not going to run a model at 120. We're going to run it at 144. So even if we miss with 100, even if we go high on the 100, or if we miss it on the 144, at least we would be covered at the 120. So he was using the 100. Well, I don't know who told him to do that, but he was saying, well, okay, the permit says, not the permit, the EIA says 144,000 barrels per day, but that was for a different exercise. That was just a model exercise, had nothing to do with the safe operating limit. And that's all you need is that language in there, the 144. But even more surprising that they were talking about 144, which is in the permit for just for model exercise on a computer to say what the emissions are going to be, nothing to do with safe operating limit. And it was supposed to be 144. And then now I'm hearing it's 150 when the oil prices go up. So there's something wrong, even though they've exceeded 144. So I would like to hear what his excuse is. And it's no coincidence, by the way, Adam. 20% is a very familiar number. And if you the 144 is 20% above the 120. So that's how they arrive at that. So they say, well, okay, let's run a model 20% above just for the air emissions. So that's how you arrive at the 144. It had absolutely nothing to do with safe operating limit. It was for a model run to see if you know what is a conservative number to calculate in terms of calculating the emissions. It had nothing to do with safe operating limit. But now they've even exceeded 144. So I would like for them to explain where they got the 150,000 from now. Even if they made a mistake on the 144, where did they get the 150,000 from?
You might sure, yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Vincent Adams. Any additional questions?
Look, I don't want to be a pest. Having exceeded the safe operating limit, what are some of the implications then?
Well, the only implication is that they're putting the facility, they're putting the whole operations at more risk. You know, you may get away with it. It's like you, for example, you or any one of us here. You know, every day we're going past the speed limit, right? And someday it's gonna catch up with us. This is exactly the same thing. You know, the good thing is when you design these equipment, okay, you leave a little bit area. Engineers, whenever you design anything, you really, even if they say 120, that's the safe limit. But just in case, let's say the material manufacturing is not, you know, the way it should be, or let's say there was human error in tightening a screw or something. So, you know, you say, well, let's give ourselves a little bit of leeway just in case something happened. So now we're not that leeway zone here that is giving us no room for error. The 100, at least the 120 would give you some room. Like a bridge, when you design a bridge, for example, it's the same thing. You know, the bridge has a certain capacity when it says you can't have a truck for more than whatever it is, 20 tons or whatever it is. You know, that also has a factor of safety in it, but you never exceed that factor of safety because that's what, you know, gives you, just in case material manufacturing or worker error, not tightening a bolt good enough. And so now we're in that zone of where something happened. There's no error. There's no room for error. That's why I said you now increase the probability of something happening. So that's the risk. We're probably getting away with it, like how you and I would go there and we you know, we speed and, you know, and then the next thing you know, you know, one day something happens and we crash because we were driving too fast, because we were getting away with it. But when they say 60 miles an hour, that is designed based on the design of the road, the curvature of the road, and the traffic and everything else. So that's what that number means.
Thanks very much again, Dr. Vincent Adams. Any additional questions?
while we, Sharon, while we
I
waiting,
see,
oh,
Dr.
sorry,
Adams, I
sorry.
see
Okay.
Davina
Oh,
from Kaicho News. Davina,
Yeah.
right ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My question is for Dr. Adams. Sir, the minister said yesterday during his presentation on the insurance liability motion that the oil operations aren't forcing the fish away, but even if it is, it's going to be that it's forcing them basically into the nets. Sir, based on your knowledge as an environmentalist and so on, how logical is his explanation?
Hey, I think that, I take that as the minister trying to be humorous, because no, I don't think anybody would take that comment very seriously. I would have to credit him with trying to be humorous, because that could not be a serious comment in a serious place of decision making. I mean, how does he have the mind of these fish as to where they would go? Even any kind of a habitat, they migrate. Now I agree with them and it's not only the vibration, it's the art. By the way, that's another set of issue with the water that they're dumping. So when you hear them talk that they've improved the environmental oversight of this thing, we had in place, we stopped them from dumping all of that toxic and hot water into the ocean with oil in that water that they're dumping. They reversed that. Exxon had agreed to it. As a matter of fact, we told them that's what they're going to have to do. But nevertheless, but that's I know that the honorable MP Patterson said that those are the next ones that are going to be coming up. But when I hear the minister, somehow is saying, well, the fish is going to move wherever they want to move. Fish and everything else, they have migratory patterns. So, I don't know where fish go. I don't monitor, or I don't have a fish, brain of a fish. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to come to shore. They might be going to deeper waters, depending. They might be, they're different things. So maybe he's an expert in fish migration and that I'm not aware of. But to me, it was just kind of a humorous.
But Davina, that's what I want to add. Even if he was being humorous, and I like to support Vincent with that. But it just shows the contempt to which they have our fisher folks in. There's a serious issue. The question of depleted fishing stock has been in our newspapers on the airways for almost 18 months now. And I made a point last evening that you can't frivolity just dismiss an issue. In their defense, to defend it, they started quoting that fishing stock is down worldwide, and so Guyana is just one of the others. But it just shows you the content in which you have the fisher folks in. Why they are satisfied to say that fishing harvest is done worldwide, and that's the excuse. They're not looking into any in depth, nor are they looking to. I made a point in the budget of this year. They allowed $200 million for fish traps. We have heard nothing at all about that. So that is exactly how whatever it is to keep the oil pumping, no matter what the consequences, that is their modus operandi.
And while we're waiting, Sharon, let me just clarify a couple of things, and I hope that the ministers are listening, because I think it's either a misunderstanding again, or it's a misinformation. I noticed the minister attacked the MP Patterson's in one of the resolutions when it says a baseline assessment. The minister somehow interpreted that, because I think he mocked the minister, MP Patterson, say, well, he talks as if he already knows what the damages are and those type of stuff. a baseline is exactly what it says, is to see what it is today. What do you have today? You know, what's the condition of the environment today? If you don't know what the condition is today, how would you know what damage there is when something happens? It's the difference between the two. What is this today? And then you look at the difference. If there is a spill, what happens? What is the damages? And that's the delta, the piece that Exxon has to pay for, especially in the context here now, especially in the context. When you start hearing Exxon start using words, and by the way, I heard the ministers themselves now are even parroting these type of the language like reasonable and legitimate. You know, I've never heard these type of things being brought into the context of something as major as a spill, especially when you start hearing them going there. The only way you can make it legitimate and reasonable is to know what that damage is. And the only way you can know what that damage is to know what you have today and what you have after the spill, to see what the difference is. The other thing that I hear Mr. Datadin mention, and Mr. Datadin is obviously a very brilliant lawyer, and I don't pretend to be one, but it bothers me when I hear Mr. Datadin say that there's no agreement between the EPA and Exxon. Well, isn't a permit an agreement? Who signs that permit? Exxon and the EPA sign that permit. So everything that he's saying, you know, in terms of the insurance that is there and the parent company coverage, you know, in that section 12, that is an agreement, or it's even a contract, you know, for all practical purpose. So when he says there is never an agreement and all this insurance and all this kind, you know, that really boggles my mind to hear, you know, here saying that there was never agreement between EPA and, well, go back. I advise Mr. Datadin to go back and see that both Exxon and the EPA signed that permit. A permit is an agreement. A permit is a contract. So, you know, sometimes it bothers me if I don't know if they're playing with words or what, but we cannot make light of things that are this serious. You know, we've got to level with the people. And the other thing I would challenge everybody when they're saying, well, there was nothing happening with they don't know about they don't know which document we're talking about with the parent company coverage. I'm telling you, when we sign off on LISA 2, when they asked me to sign that LISA 2 permit in 2019, and the reason why I signed it because LISA 2 was not going to operate until 2022. So they had 3 years to come up with that agreement for parent company. They begged me to sign it so that their investors wouldn't get nervous. And at the same time, they wanted the 3 companies to decide how they were going to be covering that extra liability. We had several meetings. My lawyer was meeting with them routinely, but yes, they got rid of that lawyer, obviously. And when they did not come up with anything by August of 2020, I put them on notice that I will not sign off on the PIARO until they come to that agreement. That was when things started moving, because they know now that they weren't going to get the PIARO and they weren't going to get the LISA 2 signed. So when we say we were getting close to an agreement, that's what it is. So you know, there wasn't any final agreement, but there were draft documents that they brought into the EPA and discussed with the attorney. He brought it to me after every meeting. He brought it to me and he told me that this is their position. And he sat there and we decided, no, this has to change. He had several meetings. So here's what I want you folks to do. Challenge them to let them put Exxon on the record. Let Exxon tell them that these discussions it never happened. You tell them to get Mr. Rod Henson, not the new guy who's here. Let them go get Mr. Rod Henson, who was involved in all of this and came up with all of it. Let them get him, put him on record to say that these things never happened and they never agree with it. So for these new guys and the new government say, well, we don't know about it, it's an easy pass for them. Let them put the people who were involved on the record. Let them get the EPA attorney, for example. The same one that they got rid of. find him, put him on the record to let them hear the truth from him.
Thanks very much, Dr. Adams. Any other questions?
Yes, I have another question, please. It's
Go right ahead,
to Doc.
Elizabeth.
Thank you. It's to Dr. Adams as well. I'm not sure, sir. There's this term being thrown around. I'm not sure if you can explain it a bit for me because I have a question that may follow up. When they talk about legitimate costs in an oil spill, can you just explain what exactly that means?
It's a legal lingo. You know what that means? That means they're now playing games. That's exactly the question I've been asking. In a spill, which part of a spill is not legitimate, or the cost? Tell me. I have asked that question in public. When I wrote, I asked the question, but they've never responded as usual. I asked, what do you mean by legitimate? Which part of a spill will not be legitimate? Which part of a spill will not be reasonable? As soon as they start embarking on these legalistic stuff, you know where they're going. And that is why, instead of this government embracing and going hook, line, and sinker in everything they say, they better take notice of what they mean when they say legitimate and unreasonable, because now they're parsing these words. And this here to me is legal stuff that they're preparing themselves if something happens. Just as how they fought us. You remember I told you about those 6 spills that they had, when the manufacturers says you have to inspect the hoses before you use them. They ignore the manufacturer's recommendation. They went out there 6 times, not 1, 2, 3, or 4 times, 6 times, ignored it. Now, are these the same people that you're going to be trust and say that these are, high standard of operation? So when they start talking about legitimate and all this kind of stuff, we need to pay very careful attention. So I wish I could answer your question. That has to be a question that I think you ought to pose to the EPA. And we don't have to go far. Look what happened in Peru with Repsol, a company that is operating in Guyana. First of all, they underreported based on the reports that we got in the newspaper. They underreported the spill, which is what happens all the time, even in the United States. That is why we always have people on the site. They underreported, and then the next thing you know, all this damage, they had to take them to court, had to force them, took them to court, fined them, and now they're in court. So that's exactly what we face. And when you see they start using these words about reasonable and legitimate, it should raise a red flag, rather than we embracing them and bowing to them and doing everything that they want. We should be challenging, though I should not, or you should not be asking the question. The government should be asking, as soon as they mention that, they should be asking them, hey, wait a minute, hold up, what do you mean by that?
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Vincent Adams. Any additional questions?
Yes, I do have a follow-up for him.
Right ahead.
Thanks. So, Dr. Adams, in the absence of the, let's say, local personnel and these FPSOs, do you think that this kind of limits our chances to prove any legitimate damages that may have been caused by Exxon or so?
Oh, well, without question.
Mm-hmm.
We do not know, like I said before, we do not even know. And I think the media has been asking these questions. I know some of my colleagues on the international scene who've been writing, and these are experts in the environment and oil and gas. They've been asking some simple questions, which should be public information. How much gas are you producing? How much are you flaring? How much are you reinjecting? How much are you using on the ship for recycle and for energy reasons? And they have not been answering the question. Even when you ask the EPA has been non-responsive. So you have to have people on board the ship to see exactly what is going on. There's a big control room on that ship. There might even be more than 1 or 2. And all you do, you look at it, there's a big screen. The whole wall is covered with every single operation that comes into that control room. It has all the measurements. It has the temperature. It has the pressure in every single piece of equipment. That's where you see everything. That's where you basically, you know, whoever you have there representing the government is spend most of their time. On top of that, they spend their time walking around, looking at equipment, walking around with the operators to see how they're conducting their business. Trust me, Exxon does not want anybody to be on that ship. Do you guys realize that in the agreement that we had to give Exxon 7 days notice to even visit that site? Unheard of. Like I said, my colleagues laughed at me. And as soon as I arrived, I changed that, and I changed the language that is in the current permit to say the EPA shall have unfettered access. That was the words in the permit. Unfettered access up to and including unannounced visits. Exxon doesn't like but not Exxon alone, no company like for you to be watching their backs, because now they want to do their thing from time to time. And I bet you they're the ones who are driving the reason why we have backtracked on our plan to have 24/7, because I made it public to them. I told them in private that's what I'm building up to at EPA. I've said it over and over on shows, and in the newspaper. The EPA has to have 24/7 coverage, and that was the start with that plan that we had there, the 36-member plan that we developed with the World Bank. So so that's where we are. On-site visit is the most important thing, the most critical thing that you can do. Like I said, if the United States, where we've got much more rigor, and where the contractors are much more fearful of the government than by far what we experience in there. If we have that in the US, tell me why we should not have it in countries of Guyana, such as Guyana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adams. Any additional questions?
Yes, please. I have one for Mr. Patterson.
Right ahead.
Mr. Patterson, you said last evening that you are going to continue to file such motions in the National Assembly and so on, that sort of seek to protect the environment and so on. On this specific motion, there seems to have been some sort of confusion in the terminology that was used in terms of multi coverage. Do you plan to perhaps pursue this and perhaps refile the motion that would explain thoroughly that we might not be seeking an insurance coverage, but what we would like to have is a document signed from the parent company to say that we are going to cover these damages, instead of having an insurance coverage secured, which they're saying might drive up the project costs and all these different arguments that were established last evening. So basically, are you going to go back there and try to have them agree to have Exxon sign a document to say that we are going to cover any additional damages that EEPGL might not be able to cover?
Thank you very much for that question, Davina. I don't think there was any confusion whatsoever. The insurance was unlimited liability, and I think Vince did a very good job in if you check the motion, it never had insurance coverage, it's unlimited liability. The government particularly took that line to give you the exact impression that you have it all, that we're looking for an insurance company to cover it. And I took a time out in my rebuttal to explain to them that's not it. I took time out to explain to them that and to the public, and I think I would have shared my presentation with you, that what the government is trying to convey to the people of Guyana is that the liability only stops at the cleanup stage. And we're saying no, that there's several other factors, several other mitigating factors, and I went through the whole thing about oceans and tourism, property values, and those things like that. So I was very well aware, and they are as well. I think, as Vince said, Mr. Datadin acknowledged that it's liabilities and what we're seeking to do. But it's what they would like to, and this is the mischief in what they're doing. So when someone asks you about that, they default back to say that we're only speaking about insurance coverage. We know, and in the motion, and in my speech, the maximum available coverage you can get in Guyana is $2.4 billion. And that is it. That's the maximum that can be here, even if you reinsure or otherwise. But we say the reason why we reference say Macondo and those things like that, most of those spills cost more than $2.5 billion. It was clear as day, but they are trying to obfuscate the issue and trying to scare people, that instead of us scaring them, they're scaring people to think that we are asking them, our companies, to take out an unlimited liability coverage as opposed to be unlimited insurance coverage as opposed to liability. You are liable for something if you cause a fault for it. How you pay for it, it's either with insurance coverage or you go into your own pocket, like BP had to do when they had the Exxon's Deepwater Horizon. They had to go into their own pockets to pay for that. So that is exactly what it is. But the government particularly are running with the line that we're trying to get insurance companies to pay for all liabilities. That was never ever the intention of the motion.
And just for me to add a little bit to what David said, to me it was clear, I've been talking about it and writing about it. All they've got to do, and again, Mr. Datadin is a brilliant lawyer. Go read the permit again. It's clear as crystal. Again, section 12.1 says you have to have insurance. Section 12.3 says, is it 3 or 4? It says that the government has to review that insurance policy. It says that, insurance policy. And section 12.5 says that the parent company has to cover everything over and above what EEPGL does not cover with that insurance. It's clear, crystal. I mean, that's exactly what I expressed initially, that it's just as if we're taking, the leadership or of this, in Parliament, our legislators are taking these type of issues that affect the regular human being in Guyana very lightly, because if they go read the permit, and what was welcoming and what was refreshing at the end of Mr. Datadin's statement, he came around to exactly what we all have been, have been advocating, and what's in the permit. I could not believe it. I almost fell out of my chair when I heard what he was saying. He said, well, if it's you got insurance, and if the additional is some kind of an agreement, that's exactly what we. So I would, as a matter of fact, Davina or whoever else, I would advise you go ask Mr. Datadin to, if now he's going to change his vote and support the motion.
Thanks very much, Dr. Adams. If there are no other questions, we've gone just over a little bit over an hour. We'd like to wrap up, but we leave a second or two. Any additional questions?
One quick one.
Right ahead.
Mr. Adams,
Yes, sir.
what implication does the increased production have for Guyana's drawdown? They say every time they pump, this is Guyana lift, and this is what lift and all of that. What implication does that excess production have for the lifts? You know what I'm talking about, the lift? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, the lift is they're gonna lift probably more frequently, because what they do, they're lifting right now. I think it's 1 million barrels per lift, meaning per shipment, if you will. So if they increase the production, that means that the time for one lift is going to be reduced. So that's all it means. That 30 barrels per day adds up really fast, because if you multiply that by 30 days, that's a lot. What is that? Almost what is that? 900,000.
Correct. Nearly 1 million. Yeah.
Yeah. So it will increase it very, very fast. That 30, because that's a quarter. You increase 30,000 barrels is all. You're increasing it by 25%. 25% over the 120,000 barrels. So your time for filling up the shipment is going to be cut by the same amount of time.
Adam, just let me follow up there. How the agreement works is that I think Guyana gets every fifth lift.
Every
fifth.
I think it's 4. Yeah, because it's the 3.
Yeah, Exxon gets 2. That's right.
Yeah.
So Exxon, which means, and I mentioned this in my presentation last night, Adam, which means that every 7 days, the FPSO are pumping 150, using that number, 150 barrels of oil, and they have a reservoir at the bottom of it. So every 7 days, that reservoir reaches 1 million barrels. A ship comes up, and the first 2 goes to Exxon as the big producer. Then the third one or the fourth one goes to CNOOC. And so every 4th or 5th time we get that is the lift, that 1 million barrel container. So by increasing it by 25%, which means it decreases the time it takes to fill up the reservoir in the SPSO, and increases the frequency in which we get our lifts. In other words, the Guyana government gets more money faster.
Yep.
Obviously, but obviously, as Vince said, there's risk in it. As you know, if it's a car and you continuously over-rev it, the risk of you breaking a bearing or whatever it is increases, as opposed to keeping it in a safe limit. So they're very, very happy with that because they get more money quicker. So instead of getting 2 lifts a month, they probably get 3 now, and well, you know the rest.
And just to, in terms of the risk that David mentioned there, a lot of times the thing is, and this is what I'm concerned about. Guyana has never lived through these high risk operations. I did, and I've experienced firsthand what can happen. That is why you make sure you've got all the guardrails up front to make you've got the oversight. When I was when in the government, our main philosophy and mantra was to make sure we had better people on our side, on the government side, than the contractors had. And of course, we used to carry that through, and they used to hire our folk, but that was okay. But if we do not monitor what may happen and to make sure that we do things safely, we may be penny wise and pound foolish. Because if something happens, who knows, we might be shut down for years or maybe forever if we got a major spill. And we'll be losing both corn and husk, as they say. So now we feel the money is coming in, but if we go do it at a risk, then and something happens, and then especially now where there's no liability coverage basically, and then the government got to foot that bill, the government goes bankrupt, then and Exxon is gone. The game is over for the entire country. It's going to be almost impossible to recover. Now we all are hoping that definitely doesn't happen, but that is why we've got to make sure upfront that the risk of that ever happening is being lessened rather than being increased for the sake of greed. So that's what it's all about. Do it safely.
Thanks very much, Dr. Adams. I think that might be it. Any other questions? All right. Members of the media, we want to thank you all for attending this week's Alliance for Change press conference. We want to wish you guys a safe weekend and a productive new week. And we're going to see you guys right back here at 2 o'clock next Friday for our weekly press conference. And we want to thank Dr. Adams, Dr. Vincent Adams, resident specialist and expert on this, and also the man who understands it equally Mr. David Patterson. Thank you both, and our very own Deputy General Secretary for being on the conference with us as well. And that's going to do it for us here. Thanks for joining once more, members of the media and members of the public. Thanks very much.
Don't stop for a minute. Come, let me take a walk, right through the ticket. You'll see our landmarks and our monuments. They're so unique. The hybrid structure, the lighthouse, the tallest wooden structure, cathedral, 176 street monuments, and the beautiful city hall. You know